Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Chris Butcher and John Pittman of the jazz group The Heavyweights Brass Band. They have a grand sound captured very well in their latest 2017 CD, This City. The band is inspired by the New Orleans brass band tradition. They always keep one foot firmly rooted in the rich legacy of jazz while the other foot steps forward into the future. They have toured across Canada, sharing the stage with the likes of The Roots, Trombone Shorty, Galactic and Hypnotic Brass Ensemble, and many others. And along the way, they have built a very loyal following, and for good reason. So please get to know the band, these cats, and dig this interview, my friends.
I just want to go ahead and say, first of all, I love the new album, and thank you for joining me and opening up about your world. I appreciate it.
Hey, Joe, thanks for the support. We love to be here.
And I love the thing about the name of your band is you're not playing around at all. It's kind of like you guys are the Mike Tyson of jazz. I like it. I love the name.
We actually had the name be at the first rehearsal of the band.
Beautiful. Sounds like it was destined, for sure. Let's go ahead and dive in here to your latest CD, This City, and talk to me a little bit about, I guess this will funnel into who you guys are as a jazz outfit, but talk to me about this album and how you feel about how it turned out.
If I could start out there, I'd say the funny thing about this album to me is that, you know, we've been a New Orleans kind of style band based out of Toronto for a long time. And when we went down, like Chris has been down in New Orleans now for a while, first studying and now living down there, and when he suggested the idea of going down to record, I wasn't really sure that we were going to have an album that came out of it, but it seemed like to me like, well, it's going to be good. We'll go down to we'll get in a studio that's used to recording brass bands, and we'll learn a lot from it, and we'll be able to take that back to whatever we do next. Then we all ended up down there and got in the thick of the whole thing, and as things started rolling, I guess a combination of the influence of the city itself and the guests that were there, and the whole thing just sort of rolled along, and all of a sudden we're like, holy crap, we got an album out of this session. So to me, that was kind of one of the neatest things about it. Was I'm not sure we even really planned to hit the studio and come out saying we've got a record, but we knew we had a few tunes, and as the whole thing evolved, all of a sudden here we had this next record come out of it, and I guess there's a huge credit to the city and the vibe of that whole thing, and to what, you know, we were able to pull some inspiration from being down there for that time.
Let me ask you how the band actually came together. Give me kind of a timeline, the inception all the way up until today.
Yeah, it is a long story. So some of us, I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I grew up trying to play music, and John Pittman and Paul Metcalf, our trumpet player and our saxophone player, were guys that could play. And I was going out to the jam sessions with my fake book, and, you know, they have a few years on me. And I remember just hearing these guys play, and to me that was an inspiration. And I ended up in Toronto. I went there to study music. A year after I ended up in Toronto, Paul Metcalf came out. And he was actually looking on Craigslist because he just moved to Toronto. He wasn't in school, and he was looking for gigs. So he saw somebody posted looking for horns for New Orleans style brass band or something like that. So he answered and showed up at a rehearsal. Our drummer was there, Lowell Whitty. And actually on the bus to that rehearsal, he ran into our tuba player, Rob Tian. Same story as Paul's. He was out of Toronto for school, came back, was looking for some gigs, answered this Craigslist ad. They met on the bus. I get a message from Paul saying, hey, I think you know this drummer. He goes to the school I went to. And, oh, yeah, I know that guy. I had a class with him, quite an interesting character. Paul's like, why don't you come out to rehearsal next week? We don't have a trombone player. So this was, we had a group. You know, it wasn't the Heavyweights Brass Band. It was the precursor. It was actually started by a woman named Marla Dixon, a trumpet player and singer who now resides in New Orleans and leads up the Shotgun Jazz Band. So Marla ended up coming down to New Orleans. The band stopped. It was called Dark Park Brass Band. And, I don't know, 6 months, a year after we'd ever done a gig, I sent a message out to Paul, to Lowell, to Rob, and another trumpet player, Jonathan Challoner, who he subbed in on some Dark Park brass band gigs, and he was a guy we went to school with as well, and said, look, guys, I think we had a thing. You know, we haven't played in a while. Marla's been gone. Let's do this. So we have our first rehearsal at my place. I lived in kind of a musician's house in Parkdale, Toronto. And a great bass player, Justin Gray, my roommate, said, oh, well, who's coming over for rehearsal today? Oh, well, we got Jonathan Challoner, and we got Lowell Whitty, and we got Paul Metcalf, and he goes, oh, the heavyweights. You know, just kind of an off-the-cuff thing he said. And I told everyone that story at rehearsal. It's like, okay, we have a name, the Heavyweights Brass Band. So that was the formation of the group. That was when I was out of school, so that would have been, let's see here, it would have been 2006, 2007, that would have been 2009. So we're clocking in almost a decade now. You know, we're getting old. But that was the original formation of the group. John Pittman ended up moving to Toronto. And, you know, we needed subs on the trumpet. Challoner went down to New York, and we've used two of them when Challoner can come up, or we just, you know, Pittman's been our guy for, what year would that have been, Pittman?
Oh, geez, I guess 2013 or something like that.
And the rest is history.
That's right. I like that. Let me ask you this. You know, you guys are a band that has, the moniker is you got one foot firmly planted in the legacy of jazz while another one is in the future. And, you know, we obviously know with a lot of the underpinnings of New Orleans what the history is and the beginnings of jazz. And I think there's a line that we can safely say as we go into the future, you're interweaving things that go from R&B to funk to Latin to all of these things. So my question is this, as we kind of sandwich those two worlds together, how important when you get together and perform and create this music is it for you to adhere to both of those worlds equally? Is that kind of your aim? What's your aim to meld these worlds to make your unique sound?
My thought on forming them was I went down to New Orleans when I was 17, just about to turn 18. This was pre-Katrina. And I saw a group of kids, it would have been Canal and Bourbon Street. They were likely my age. They're likely 18-ish or something, playing brass band music for tips. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was just the way that these guys were blowing the trumpet, blowing the trombone. You know, it wasn't like some kids who went to jazz school or, you know, Canadian jazz. It was, you know, it's kind of the polar opposite of that. So, I mean, that was the inspiration for forming the group was, look, we got this kind of folk music, you know, these people play a certain way. I love that. We kind of love that. Lowell had played in all the traditional New Orleans jazz groups in Toronto, and everyone loved Louis Armstrong or loved these guys. So, I mean, it was inspired by that. But the thing is, if you look at our life experience, it was something where, you know, I played in a lot of Afro-Cuban and salsa groups. John Pittman and Paul and Challoner and these guys would play with the great funk bands in Toronto. You know, we were all kind of digging musicians, and we are products of our environment. So, you know, that's kind of the most important thing to me is that, you know, you bring your life experience into it. You bring the music you like. You bring the past experiences you've had in music. So that's what the Heavyweights are. It's just a collection of everybody's experience in music. And as much as we are inspired by the New Orleans tradition, and as much as this city, this album in particular, is really a homage to that, you know, with members of the Dirty Dozen Brass Band, members of Preservation Hall, we're not going to throw away our life experience, you know? So that's why we're going to have a different angle and we're going to have a different outlook than somebody who grew up in the Treme, the Sixth Ward, and played in brass bands their whole life. So to me, it's just kind of an organic thing. We let the music happen. We are inspired by certain things, but we're just doing it. We're doing our best. We're playing the music like only we can, you know?
Yeah, it feels too like when I think about the band rehearsing, like to speak to a little bit having one foot in both places. Like I know there's been times where in a rehearsal someone's brought forward a tune and been like, well, that's not really a brass band tune. And then we're like, well, what does it matter? Like, is it a tune that we can do? And then somebody's brought forward an original composition, and we're like, it doesn't really sound like a heavyweights tune. It feels more like it belongs somewhere else. Or we've worked on a tune and like workshopped it and said, well, it's a cool tune, but it needs a little bit more of the New Orleans vibe. Or like there's a process in rehearsal as we're sort of working through things and workshopping stuff of trying to figure out, one, does the tune really suit the band? And then like, does it have kind of the flavor in it that we want? Because there's some stuff that just has a lot of that second line and New Orleans feel. But then the full album that came out before this one, Astronomical, was really cool. There's a cover of this tune called Telephone that Erykah Badu did, and the tune really comes out as just like, it's really extraordinary. I always felt about that tune that it feels like a really big band, but there's still just 5 guys recording it, and the colors that we got on that really like just sort of made sense. And so I think sometimes it's just like, does this, do we collectively feel like the arrangement's working? Does it fit the band? Does it like, do we feel like it makes people, it gives them that feel of a heavyweight show of like, makes you want to groove, makes you want to get up and dance, but gives us room to express ourselves too. So I guess the rehearsal process is a lot of where that gets explored too. Like, does this feel like it fits our thing? And if it doesn't, how do we mold it to make it suit our audience and what we're trying to do?
So let's move beyond the rehearsal realm and go to live. It has to be fun to be a big outfit like this to perform live. How do you feel about performing live?
I was going to say it's probably the best part. I mean, it's as a group, we've have played everything from very, very tiny, intimate rooms that are just crammed tighter than a sardine, and then very large theater venues and very large festival venues, and that sort of interaction and connection with the crowd. Whether it's in a large space or a small space, just feeling that reaction and feeling that energy, I think it's part of what makes this this sort of New Orleans-inspired music, the brass band tradition in particular, so special. It's got that guttural in the street, bringing music to the community, sharing music with people. It's got that. I think it's designed to get people up and going. It has that feel to it. So the live show is really where it's the best. And I think this album probably captures that feel and vibe in a really particular way.
100%. I agree. To me, making an album and playing live are two different things. And a lot of what we try to do is capture the live feel when we do a recording. And sometimes that's easier said than done. If you got headphones on, it's not the same feeling. It's 11 a.m. and, it's just the 5 of us. We're going to play differently than, if there's people sweating and dancing right there kind of in with us or feeling it or giving us energy back. To me, the thing I love about music is live. A live performance, we just try and bring it. I mean, if you listen to this city, you're going to get a picture of the band, and I think, as Pittman mentioned, we did a really good job of getting that feeling across. But the only way you can really feel it is come out and check us out. We're going to be doing a cross-Canada tour this summer. We got the CD release at Lula in Toronto on March 29th. And we hope to be bringing it to the States. We hope to be playing Kansas City someday,
Man, I'd love to see you guys out here. I'd love to see that whole collective on stage. So let me ask you this. You speaking of getting to Kansas City, you've been around for a long time. I didn't realize you were around this long. You've had a lot of mileage on your yes, we're all getting old. You've got a lot of mileage on your odometer, and I want to know this. Up to this point in your career, how do you guys feel about what's happened, and how do you feel about the future as you move forward?
I feel it's strong. I feel like this is the strongest album we've made, and that we have support from a few different places, Slamming Media. We have support from Lula World Records, and we kind of have some of those pieces together, and with Orange Grove Publicity. So we got the machine behind this, and it's so nice that it's on the Jazz Week's most added list we're getting interviews in Kansas City. I really feel strong about the future and growth for us, because as much as we're a known commodity in Canada, having played every jazz festival across the country, you know, we're an unknown commodity outside of Canada and outside of Toronto in particular. And I mean, we have toured kind of the Rust Belt of the States near Toronto. We have played North Dakota. We have had a tune on a Giles Peterson disc, which got distribution worldwide and, you know, was a little bit of a thing in Europe. I feel that there's so much growth for us. You know, never having been to Europe, never having been to large portions of the United States. And I'm excited. Hopefully we can, you know, hopefully you'll be talking to us in the year and we've opened some of those doors, Joe.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know, the one thing that's very key about any musician or group is that you always harken back to those influences that have gotten into you. Talk to me a little bit about any live shows you guys have seen that really influenced and swayed you and made you feel a certain way.
I'm trying to think of like there's been those times where, like, as a band, we've had the opportunity to be at things like where, like when I'm thinking, like as a full group, there was obviously the time that we were down recording this record, being able to go out to the club scene together and check out bands that were playing there and connect with some of our friends that are in New Orleans and hearing them do stuff. But I think back to it was not so long ago we did a workshop before a Preservation Hall concert that was happening here in Toronto, and so to be able to go out and hear some of those bands that influence us, or open for some bands that influence us, and like take that in as a collective. Like the Heavyweights have had the chance to open up for all kinds of different New Orleans and other brass bands, from the Lowdown Brass Band in Chicago to Trombone Shorty to Galactic Brass Band, and some of the groups that we've opened for on tour as well. Like, I think there's something powerful to when you're all, you know, it's the same thing we were talking about before, about the power of a live show, and then being able to experience that as a collective, and just sort of like the energy and the dialogue and the artistic spin that grows off of that. I think that's all kind of those are kind of some of the most influential moments or memorable moments as a band. I know definitely when we've been out on the jazz festival circuit together, I can remember catching Kenny Werner's band as a group, and then just like sort of spinning and talking about that afterwards, about, you know, being able to catch a show together, as opposed to, I guess those moments really resonate, because I can still remember sitting there with the guys and talking about the music afterwards, and some of the pieces that we've played or covers that we've done were inspired by groups that the band had a chance to open for. The Telephone cover I was mentioning earlier, you know, that's an opportunity where the band was in the same place to hear some inspired and powerful music, and it led to growth and development for the band itself too. So,
let me ask you kind of a generic question here. Why do you love jazz?
Because to me, it's the closest representation of life, in the sense of, in jazz, you know, we leave large portions of it up to improvisation, up to playing in the moment. You know, when I play a lot of R&B, I play a lot of salsa music, Latin music, and I love those forms of music, but I don't feel the same level of freedom in them. And, you know, I played a New Orleans traditional jazz gig last night, and we did a little rehearsal before. And, you know, of course, you got to rehearse. You got to know the tunes. You got to know the melodies and the song forms and what's going on. But I love how in every performance you can go totally different directions. If you're feeling a certain way, you can go a certain way. If the clarinet player is going a certain way, I'm going to try and follow him or respond. And, you know, this personal freedom, this ability to to be in the moment. You know, to be honest, that's kind of my day. I had this interview with you. I got some stuff I got to do. I got to make some food. I got to sort this out. I got to go to the grocery store. I got to call a bunch of people. You know, I've got these plans. I've got these kind of like signposts or song forms that I've guidelines, but really, you know, life is kind of what happens in between. So that's what I'd say I love most about jazz.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That sort of just that ability to have a dialogue, and you know, the connection that you make with the connection that you're able to make with other musicians, and the way you're able to respond to each other and to an audience in a really sort of organic way. It can create something really deep and unexpected that's unique, that you don't always find in other musical situations. So.
Well, let me ask you this. I want to kind of boil everything down to this point, kind of get to the essence of you guys as a group, and I want to ask you this. I always ask individuals, you know, everyone has a perception of who you are, your family, your friends, your colleagues, but who do you think you are? And I'm going to ask this more of, who do you think you are as a group? How, in this Twitter world that we live in of brevity and getting to the point expeditiously, would you explain who you are that could potentially lure people into a show? You guys come into town, they don't know who you are. How do you explain and sell who you are so they want to see you?
I mean, in a tweet, I would say, you know, we're having a good time. We're expressing that in music, and, you know, come check it out live, because, you know, they say a picture tells 1,000 words. Well, you know, we can talk about the music as much as we want, but, you know, talking about music is like dancing about architecture. So check it out. Listen to a track. Come to a live show. It's going to make you feel something. It's going to make you feel good. So give us a chance. That's what I would say.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you very much for talking to me about the new album, talking to me about your trajectory, and hopefully we will see you here in Kansas City. That would be a thrill to see you all live.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New Orleans, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to the Heavyweights Brass Band for their time, their stories, and that great music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.